give a second or two. Everyone's jumping on in and jumping on with our Facebook Live streaming. So we're just going to give that a second to get going. But again, I want to thank all of you for joining here today. We've got a great panel to discuss the American Rescue Plan, and could not be more excited to hear from the experts that we have here with us today. So we're going to give it just a second for everybody to get on their devices, get on, join us, get to where they need to be. So they can hear this important conversation. But again, I thank you, we thank you for taking the time to jump on with us today. And as I'm giving that again, I just want to say welcome to everyone. I am Mayor Sean Spiller here in Montclair, and this is a town hall conversation about the American Rescue Plan. We all know we've heard a lot about it. We still have a lot of questions, but really I think it's an important piece where people are looking for answers to help guide us, certainly as a town, as a community. And we've got a lot of experts on today to help us with that. So thank you for joining us. This past year, we've faced unprecedented challenges. When the pandemic hit, I have to say, we got to work. In Montclair, we were well positioned to weather the storm financially, thanks to the great work for the last 8-9 years in terms of our financial management. And with our partners at the county, state, local levels, we've been able to chart a path to recovery. I want to recognize first the work of the Mayor's COVID-19 task force. They really have just put in significant time. Really have to thank all of them for some of them their own dollars that they put in, but they've also secured grant dollars. They've been working to support our small businesses and our nonprofits within our community. Certainly also, I think we all recognize the great work that Essex County has done. Really fantastic work putting together a top-notch testing program and a vaccination program. And certainly in partnership with Commissioner Gill, who joins us here today, we also were able to take the additional step of ensuring that our educators got access to vaccines as quickly as possible. And we secured additional COVID-19 testing resources for our schools. Governor Murphy has been an extraordinary ally in this as well, partnering with us to expand testing in Montclair and doing so much more. And today, we're here to talk about what comes next. Thanks to President Joe Biden's leadership and the advocacy of our members of Congress and our senators, we now have relief coming from the form of the American Rescue Plan. And with me today to talk about what the American Rescue Plan is, what it means for Montclair, I have a few distinguished individuals. First, from the White House Senior Advisor, Luke McGowan, is here. We have Chief Policy Advisor to Governor Phil Murphy, Dr. Zakiya Smith-Ellis, and Essex County Commissioner Brendan Gill. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining with me here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
First, I want to start off just by opening it up with maybe a little broader look at what this means and what this is all about. So Luke, maybe I'll go to you first. We've heard a little bit about, ARP. We all know that it is one of the most ambitious and significant pieces of legislation that we've seen in our lifetimes. Can you take a moment just to walk us through the process of getting to what ultimately was signed into law by the president?
Thank you, Mayor Spiller. I'd be happy to, and it's good to be with you all in Montclair. As the mayor said at the top, the American Rescue Plan is one of the most significant pieces of legislation passed in recent memory. It also represents one of the most significant investments in local government in a generation. The work, I'll say the president recognized during the campaign and then once he assumed office, the need for direct and flexible aid to communities. I also will share personally, I was working in a mayor's office just a few months before the administration came in, and I recognized how much local government leaders were doing to meet the needs of their constituents, at every level. The need was clear, and even in New Jersey, just to share, since the pandemic began, over 800,000 people have been infected with COVID-19. Over 20,000 people have died. The joblessness rate has ticked up from close to 4% to close to 8%. More than 370,000 people have lost their jobs. 9% of all adults in the state report not having enough food to eat. And that includes 330,000 families with children. And the list of household expenses that people are having trouble paying throughout the pandemic until still to today really goes on. 18% of renters are not caught up on rent. Homeowners aren't able to keep up with their mortgage payments. And about 32% of adults statewide in New Jersey really report having difficulties affording all of their household expenses. So that's really shows the need for action that you saw through the rescue plan. And what the rescue plan does is really 3 categories of activities. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, but essentially giving local governments, local groups, nonprofits, school systems the resources they need to knock down the virus, get schools reopened, to get PPE, testing, and vaccination resources out into the community. That's 1. 2, it's getting direct benefits to individuals and working families that are bearing the brunt of this crisis. And 3, it's direct support to local governments and states. And so you saw that in the plan. For New Jersey specifically, this is resulting in over $6 billion in state fiscal relief and $3.5 billion in local fiscal relief. And then a number of direct stimulus payments and support to individuals. The process, just to get it to your question, what we've been doing over the last few months has been running a consultation process with individuals, governments, state and local governments, tribal governments, to understand really what are the needs to inform the guidance that will be released soon and the allocations that will be released about that state and local program, which you'll see in the weeks ahead. So that's what has sort of undergirded everything the administration is doing is speaking directly to Americans, speaking directly to local elected officials to understand the needs on the ground so that these federal policies can be designed to meet those needs as effectively as possible. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, and certainly appreciate that overview and the perspective there. And thank you. And I think it's such an asset that you were, with local government, understanding some of the challenges going on as you stepped into that role that you're in now. One quick follow up to it, and we all had a lot of experience with CARES dollars, and of course, everyone was appreciative of those dollars, but there were some limitations around it. They were to reimburse for expenditures like sanitizers or masks or things of that nature. But it didn't account for, in a lot of instances, lost revenue and all the other dynamics that certainly municipalities and a lot of other people were facing. So as it relates to what we're seeing now, right? What does that mean in terms of, certainly we'll go to, certainly the state perspective in a moment, but from the federal one, as the dollars come to local municipalities, what are local municipalities able to use those dollars on, and how does that process work?
Thanks, Mayor, for that question. I certainly understand what it's like on your side of the Zoom screen, trying to parse through, guidance as it's coming out. And sort of bringing that perspective into the administration was important. The president, spent a lot of time with governors, mayors, county elected officials, trying to understand that perspective. The Treasury Department, as I said, is going through a process right now to design that guidance and is speaking to some of those concerns with past aid programs to make sure that guidance is clear, that local government has flexibility to use those dollars where it's needed. And that guidance will be coming soon, and I won't get ahead of the process there, but you can expect to see some news on that soon.
Well, that's appreciated, and I'll use this opportunity to give that plug of as much flexibility as possible is great. Certainly, we've got a lot of challenges, certainly, and budget concerns and constraints. So, our ability to kind of use those dollars to, help our small businesses, plug holes in revenue, help our residents reach out, as you noted, I'm glad they're taking those pieces into consideration. So thank you for that. Next, as we move to the state, and you identified it, you talked about the $6 billion going into the state, and of course, comparatively to the $3.5 billion going into local governments. So Dr. Smith-Ellis, I'll probably go to you next. And certainly, as I noted before, Governor Murphy's done an excellent job during this pandemic. And, we all know the, unbelievable challenges that we've all faced and are still facing. But from your perspective, what would you describe as some of the biggest challenges and opportunities that we now have here as we look at ARP?
Well, thanks, Mayor Spiller, and it's good to be with you. I think, first of all, we want to just appreciate the work of the Biden administration in getting this across the finish line. This was a huge need, and we're really thankful to our congressional delegation and to the administration for getting it there. There's tremendous challenges, as you know, across the state. We had CRF, but it was woefully inadequate in meeting the full needs of our residents, whether it's paying for rent and mortgages. That's a program that we had that was definitely oversubscribed, to small businesses and small business assistance, and just being able to get grants to make up for the time and the revenue that they lost during this time. You mentioned lost revenue. That was something that we saw across the board. And small businesses are not just things like, restaurants, which obviously had an outsized impact, but things like daycares, which have also been kind of impacted. So we're seeing kind of across the board a variety of our just local establishments in cities and towns across the state have been struggling, as well as individuals who've been struggling. And so one of the things that we're excited about, it's not necessarily money that's coming directly to the state, but we know that there are billions of dollars, I think, if I'm counting correctly, about 9.6 billion that we can expect will go individually to New Jerseyans as part of the $1,400 checks that they'll be receiving. I think one of the things that we'll be thinking about statewide is what additional support may we need to provide to individuals, again, whether they're struggling with arrears for their mortgage or rent, utility arrears, additional assistance with childcare, which is something that we did with CRF funds. And as a state, we borrowed a significant amount of money just to get through the past budget cycle. And so one of the things that we're looking for from the federal government is the extent to which we'll be able to use some of the funding to offset our debt that we have. And as you know, just from a statewide perspective, we were thankful that the budget for this year, the revenues are looking better than expected, but we really don't want to be in a situation where we're literally using borrowed dollars to kind of move forward. So the governor is committed to, as much as possible, using our funds to pay down debts so that we're not kind of behind the eight ball. And we're thankful that, the credit rating agencies, one of them recently kind of put us on a stable outlook rather than negative, but that's something that we're always having in the back of our minds, or in the forefront of our minds, really, is what is our state's fiscal position more broadly. And so we know that the money from the ARP can help us solidify our fiscal position and really move forward in a way that allows us to bolster our state coffers where we've had to really borrow in the past.
Well, certainly, living that experience here at the local level, reducing our debt the way we have over the last 9 years, and our increased bond rating, we know the impact that has, kind of, solidifying you moving forward and for the next challenge that comes. Do you have a sense of the dollars that are coming in? Not going to hold you to a percentage here, but how many of those dollars the governor would like to see, move to repay some of that borrowing versus investing in a lot of those programs you talked about? Or do you think that the borrowing that happened already is enough to cover those areas? Where is that breakdown in the dollars as you see them coming in now?
Well, I wish I could tell you exactly. That's literally what we're trying to figure out, and we're not to put pressure on the feds, but we are waiting on federal guidance to figure out exactly how we can use our funds so that we can make that determination of how much. And is just for folks to know, these are dollars that don't have to be spent all at once, and we don't want to spend them all at once. We want to be prudent and spend them over the next several years. So we have until 2024 to expend those dollars. And so part of the determination will not only be how much is spent kind of on programmatic needs versus, debt avoidance or things like that, but also how much is spent in this fiscal year versus the subsequent one. So once we have the guidance from the federal government about, exactly how we can use the dollars, that'll give us some more, which we're expecting, I think, within the next month or so. That'll give us kind of what we need to share more about these specifics in terms of the allocations, not only year to year, but also kind of programmatically.
And I guess it's just another follow-up to that. A lot of what we're talking about are some of the challenges that people have faced with, whether that be rent or mortgages and some of those dynamics. But the governor has often talked about, a fairer, stronger New Jersey. How does it fit in when you guys are having these discussions where the governor and his team, you all, can help move forward that agenda of a fairer, stronger New Jersey? How do these dollars help fit into that goal and the work that he's been doing quite well for the last 4 years?
No, thank you for that question. And I think the agenda overall, we were moving in a direction prior to the pandemic, and the pandemic kind of threw us off course, but we definitely want to keep moving in that direction. One area that I know you know well is that I'll bring up is education, for instance, right? And so schools the school districts are getting money not only through the state, but directly through the American Rescue Plan. And so one of the things there that we, provided money to close the digital divide, but also to provide additional funds through the funds that the state had to help schools do a couple of things: accelerate learning, because we know that some students may have struggled during the time period of remote learning, and also for mental health. So because we know that many of us, and particularly, our kids and our students are struggling with this transition. So to provide funds to help move us forward in that arena. Again, I brought up childcare before. Previous to, again, the pandemic, we were trying to help our residents afford childcare and deal with, the dynamic, particularly that disproportionately affects women, of needing to have childcare in order to work. And again, the pandemic has only exacerbated that need. But that's another area where we're able to kind of think about moving forward. There's also, things around, I would say, like juvenile justice, the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, just a number of areas where we, again, prior to the pandemic, we're trying to move forward, and we are thinking about how we can use some of these programmatic dollars to kind of jumpstart efforts that were already underway. The last piece that I'll mention, the governor, right before everything hit, had unveiled a talent development plan called Jobs New Jersey. So to really think about how to get individuals, whether it's young folks or older folks who may have been laid off and are trying to retool, how to get them the skills that they need to be competitive, and to really invest in people. And that was something that we announced in, I think, February of 2020, and had a really ambitious agenda about how to build apprenticeships, how to build lifelong learning accounts and things like that. And now, again, whether it's through ARP dollars, we're not exactly sure, but that's something that we're squarely thinking about. And again, a number of folks are, the impact on folks' livelihoods couldn't have been stronger in this pandemic. And so we really want to think about how do we move forward on that stronger, fairer agenda of investing in people, potentially with these dollars, but there's also some investments in the state budget that we think will help us in that vein as well. So kind of all of the above answer to moving forward on some of those pieces.
Now, fair. I know that it absolutely remains, one of his priorities, and of course, everybody moving forward on that front. But it's nice to hear exactly how you think that there's overlap here and how these pieces can help, move forward with that goal and that agenda. So thank you for that. Commissioner Gill, I wanted to kind of go to you next, because we all know that there's a lot going on, but as you get closer and closer to local government, right, you kind of are getting a sense of what's happening on the ground and from a different perspective, if you will. We know, what's happened here in Montclair. We've heard what the feds are doing, and thankfully, from our President Biden has been able to get done, and our congressional delegation, you hear Governor Murphy and the state has been able to do, which is great. At the county level, I guess I'd turn it over to you. A lot of people probably are less aware, let me start with how has the county been impacted, and what was the response like from the county, with the impact that you've seen?
Sure. So Mayor, thank you, and great question. And first of all, again, thank you for having me. To the two other panelists, I'm really honored to be with you. These are heavyweights. I'm a much smaller part of this process. But both to Luke and to Dr. Zakiya Smith Ellis, of course, thank you for what each of you are doing, both on the federal and state level, to help our county recover from this pandemic. And as you noted, Mayor, I represent on the legislative branch of county government, the entire county. Now we've formerly known as freeholders, now called commissioners, and happy to see that. But I represent all of the municipalities in Essex County on the commissioner board. However, always have a special eye on the community that I was born and raised in Montclair, and how Montclair is interacting, with the county level. First and foremost, I was proud to, at the local level, to support the American Rescue Plan. As President Biden stated when he signed the bill into law, he said that this legislation, and I quote, is to help rebuild the backbone of this country. And by granting financial assistance to state and local governments and putting money into the pockets of middle-class Americans. And then I was proud to support that initiative, and glad to see that it got done. And although, as noted, the federal government is providing, I believe, $1.9 trillion of financial assistance, nationally, it's really the local and county governments that are going to be on the front lines and ensuring that, these funds result in really tangible services that impact the communities in which we live. Or as Governor Murphy likes to say, at the point of attack. And that's where, I think that's our obligation and our job to make sure that these funds are invested with whatever guidelines do come in a way that make tangible differences in people's lives each and every day. So Essex County's total allotment from the American Rescue Plan was about $463 million. The government itself, the Essex County government, the county government is receiving roughly $154 million. And then each municipality is receiving a share of the $308 million. Going forward, I believe, Mayor, that Montclair will be receiving around 3.7 million, directly as part of this program. But yes, to get to your original question, Essex County was hit unbelievably hard by COVID-19. As of yesterday, our county had 2,590 lost souls, which is more than any other county in the state of New Jersey. It's a pandemic that has transcended every single aspect of our lives, and it clearly has impacted our approach in carrying out our day-to-day work-related activities. I think this was noted before I can kind of get to what the county has planned for these ARP funds. I think it's been noted that we're still waiting on some guidance, as touched upon, and we're hoping that there's as much flexibility in that guidance as possible, I'm sure, from a local and county perspective. So we want to make sure that whatever we do from a county government perspective, that we're responsible, right, in adhering to what these parameters that are going to be established, in a fiscally prudent manner and in an effective manner. I'm proud to say that under the leadership of both our county executive, Joe D, and my colleagues on the board, we're going to continue. I know that we're going to continue to provide the same COVID relief services that we've offered throughout the past year. So we're going to still have our free accessible COVID-19 testing sites. We're going to continue to have our weekly food distribution events, and thank you, Mayor, in the Township of Montclair, for hosting those. It's actually, if you really want to get a sense of how this pandemic is also affecting people, not only from a public health standpoint, we have now, for every single week for a year now and change, had a weekly food distribution, and no questions asked. And when you and I've had the opportunity to volunteer in that, not every week, but quite a bit over the last year. And you will see all types of people from all walks of life in that line every single week. And it hits home, when you're an elected official, to see that and motivates you to want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to meet the community need that's so clearly out there. We're going to continue our rental assistance programs. We're going to continue our mortgage assistance programs, our small business assistance programs. So I think in the same way that we use the federal funds from the CARES Act, to supplement COVID relief services and our community block development grants, I would expect that, this $154 million from the American Rescue Plan, will be used to help offset the costs, of those services, while we continue to also maintain the same standards of services, to the residents of Montclair and the county that they have come to expect, from our senior service program, our rehabilitation services, and the traditional services that the county has offered. Just in the last year, Mayor, Essex County has allocated over $340,000 to Montclair for items such as, streetscape improvements, sewer improvements, your counseling program, transitional housing, after-school tutoring, all things that I think were touched upon by Dr. Ellis and Luke in their presentations. Like, this is money that's going directly into nonprofit and corporations and other services that are helping us meet that need. In the last year, we allocated over $3 million to residents through our mortgage assistance program, $5 million to residents through our rental assistance program, $10 million through our small business lease assistance program, So, I would certainly encourage those who are joining us today, and those, and others who are, throughout our communities, to look into these programs and make sure that, and we have an obligation to do that too, but to make sure that they're taking advantages of both those funds that have been available and will continue to be available, I think, as we move forward. Last but not least, of course, I think that the funds will be absolutely used to positively impact the countywide vaccination program. I think Essex has been the leader in the state, not just because I'm on the Board of Commissioners and I live here, but it's safe to say objectively that I believe Essex has run an excellent vaccination distribution program, which we're going to continue to need to do. We have given out, as of today, 173,563 first doses and 122,199 second doses. And we need to continue to expand that number for sure in terms of our response. So I think, Mayor, a very long-winded answer to your question to say that this ARP program is going to help us to continue to meet this public health crisis in just in so many different ways. And we look forward to partnering, of course, with the state and federal government to make sure that our residents are getting the services that they deserve.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. And Luke, I saw you looking that whole time because you've heard from all of us that we need that guidance and we need that flexibility. But certainly we're all looking forward to that. So really, we can know what some of the parameters are to go forward. That's very clear. And I will just echo, Commissioner, what you noted about the vaccination efforts in the county. Having had the opportunity to get around, see the different sites and see how it's going through. I mean, my goodness, just top notch. Everybody who reaches out. Really just thrilled with the experience. To the volunteers that work there all the time, a big thank you. To the nurses who are there staffing it, a big thank you, and everyone else. So really just a phenomenal job. And I think now we're at that time. I know the governor has alluded to this in his last few remarks, and we're starting to see this. We're going to have to, work our darndest to make sure everyone gets vaccinated here and understands the importance of such. We're just starting to see where we all remembered how hard it was for some time to get on and get those vaccination appointments. Now we're starting to see where, hey, we've got to make sure as the quantity of vaccine that's available keeps increasing here, we've got to keep filling these appointments to make sure that people continue to get vaccinated. So certainly I take this opportunity to encourage, everyone to get vaccinated if you haven't already. Get signed up and let's get back to our new normal, as soon as possible with everyone getting vaccinated. So just wanted to offer that as well. Now, I know we have a number of questions that are also coming in from those listening to today's town hall. So I wanted to get a couple of those in, and of course have a couple other questions I want to ask each of you. But first, I wanted to just go to one of the questions I see. Is from Greg, and he basically notes that sounds like a lot of funding for the rescue plan before there was a real understanding of the nature and scope of need of what the need is. There should be a better understanding of the scope and need before proposing any funds. And instead of the flexibility, it sounds like it's pork barrel spending. So that's Greg's characterization. And Greg, I'll start with the answer on this and just say, as Commissioner Gill noted, Montclair slated to potentially receive about $3.7 million. And again, that's spread over a couple of years here. I will note that just from a scope and magnitude, every penny of that would not be enough to plug the revenue losses just from 1 year's budget, just from one. So, the scope of it, you could double, triple that amount for Montclair, and we're not even through spending it on just town lost revenues. And that's before we get out there and try to initiate greater programs and funding for our small businesses, our resident programs, and the other great institutions we have here in town. So from a magnitude perspective, I can certainly speak to, we could use double, triple that amount before we even started to get close to our lost revenues. So it certainly will, and by the way, Luke, that's a plug. We'll take more if you can get more out to us. But certainly we plan on, within the guidance and guidelines that come forward, coordinate with the county and state to make sure that through those efforts, we try and reach as many people as possible and support everyone in our community, and certainly all the communities in need throughout this state and nation. So, yeah, but thank you for that comment and general question. Another question comes from William. He says the Biden administration has done a great job of getting vaccinations into the arms of people. When will the DCA in New Jersey get dollars into the hands of tenants and landlords? That's his question. So maybe Dr. Smith-Ellis, I'll go to you with that one and see if you have a sense of maybe how soon some of these things could happen.
Sure. And so the DCA is already has a landlord and rental assistance program that's been up and running for some time, but we know that it has been oversubscribed. So that's where I spoke to, the need is greater, and that actually goes to the previous answer that Mayor Spiller gave. There's so much need out there that it's hard to even comprehend. People are really struggling in a variety of different areas. So as soon as we get the guidance for the American Rescue Plan and really determine how we'll be able to use the new funds, we'll see if that's an area where we can dedicate some additional funding so that they can help even more residents. But we certainly recognize that there's a tremendous amount of need there. I think, Commissioner Gill mentioned that there's, a rental assistance program for Essex County as well that they stood up in the past. And so I'm sure that as we get that guidance, we'll determine if there's additional funds that we can dedicate to meet those needs.
Thank you for that. And again, so William, you're hearing, waiting on a little bit of that guidance, but of course, as rapidly as possible. And the good news, as you're hearing there, is a little bit of that infrastructure is already in place. We've whether it be county level, state level, have done some of these pieces already. It's getting the dollars in, making sure the program allows for it. And then that infrastructure work is in place, which would, you would perceive allow it to happen a little even quicker than maybe it originally even did. So just noting that as well. Next question is from Barbara. She notes, can ARP funds be used to make necessary repairs in public schools and early childhood facilities? How soon can those funds be deployed? So not going to, be the broken record, but certainly, as we've just noted, we're waiting for a little bit of that guidance. So we'll start there again before any funds can be deployed here, and they've got to come in also. I think that what you do touch upon, and maybe I'll open this up to everybody on here who would like to address it. Some of the challenges and the conversations that are ongoing now, certainly despite the fact that these are funds that can be used over a few years, they are limited, right, in terms of programs that have continuing costs, right? How do you factor that in? So it does become appealing to do capital-like projects where there's, a specific, cost to make a specific repair, and that's a one-time piece. Of course, we all know you have to make continual investments in capital pieces, but it's a one-time piece for that specific thing versus a program. You roll out programs, programs have to be continually funded, and that's a challenge when these are distinct dollars that are used over a specific period of time, and then you don't have them. So that's a little bit of a longer answer on how these dollars can be used, but maybe from the perspective of everybody on here, what is that guidance, or what's the thought process for those who are in the decision-making roles of how those dollars are used, or the guidance or advice that each of you is putting out to how the dollars be used with regard to the very definitive nature of when they exist and when they then don't?
So if I can start, and then maybe others can jump in. So there are dollars that went directly to school districts, and that could be used for, depending on the level of kind of like how much are we talking about capital repairs. Is it a minor thing that could be done relatively quickly? There are some dollars that, from our understanding and our read, could be used from what already exists to school districts. Having said that, I think this is a great plug for the American Jobs Plan, which is not yet passed, but it's a major infrastructure spending. So Luke, I don't know if you want to say anything about that, but there's a major piece there about construction, actually, if I read the press release correctly. And then just today, the American Families Plan was unveiled by the Biden administration. So the American Rescue Plan was the first piece of this that the administration unveiled, and we have the dollars, and we're just waiting on the guidance. So that's fantastic. But there are two more pieces that are awaiting, congressional approval, and those are the American Jobs Plan and the American Families Plan, which would, I think, speak to some of the needs that your question.
So Luke, I'll go to you next, and just for everybody on the numbers I've generally heard, but of course nothing confirmed definitively. It's about $6 million for our schools here in Montclair. So I think that's the number that we're talking about associated here. And of course, their use of those dollars as they go through the process and wait for the guidance as well. But Luke, maybe, talking about both of those other pieces and maybe just a brief piece on process, because it is important to I think everybody notes, can they get this stuff done? Again, it seems that reconciliation can be used for both of these other pieces with the financial piece, but explain to us a little of that maybe, and what you're seeing in terms of being able to pass both of those pieces that Dr. Smith Ellis noted, and then what that would mean for residents here in Montclair.
Thank you, Mayor Spiller. And I don't know if I'll be able to answer all of those questions that you managed to pack in, but I know it's all very critical to decision makers in communities, to individuals living in Montclair, but also just really heartened to see the engagement from folks in Montclair from different areas. It sounds like from nonprofits, from the school district, and I just I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of busy days to be part of this conversation. To the first point, as Dr. Ellis mentioned, significant funding, tens of billions of dollars directly to school districts to make improvements to ensure that reopening can happen and that it can be done safely. And so that does include, in some cases, capital improvements. And but when you think about it, it's like ventilation improvements, things really associated with COVID and its direct impacts. That was the vision for the rescue plan. So it's tackling the effects of the pandemic, both its health effects, but also its economic impacts, which I can see from some of the questions in the chat too. Those did have disparate impacts on communities of color, especially, and you've seen some rural communities as well that have really struggled. So that's what the rescue plan was designed for. There are specific call outs in the state and local program for infrastructure improvements, including broadband, water, and sewer. So that is called out in the statute, in the law, as allowable, eligible uses. But it is, again, that guidance process is going through the policy process with the Treasury Department, today as we speak. And it is actually valuable even today to be hearing the conversation so that we can make sure it gets back to the decision makers. As Dr. Ellis mentioned, I'm glad that others can do this work and I don't have to be the only one. We are very much in a live conversation about the American Jobs Plan, and you'll be hearing a lot about the American Families Plan today from the president. And I'll just, it's difficult to boil it down into the few minutes we have here, but really this is an important next step. If you think about the rescue plan as getting at those negative effects of the pandemic, the jobs plan and the families plan are really about making those investments for the future, that bridge to the 21st century economy that we need, and to really address so many of the problems we've seen, wealth inequality, health inequities that have really been exacerbated by the pandemic, but predated the pandemic. And so these are major investments in our infrastructure, in how we live, how we get around, and how our economy works. And so I'll leave it there because I would hate to get ahead of the president, would encourage everyone to tune in to the address later today.
All right, Luke, noted that you don't want to preemptively give the president's remarks here on our town hall, so I won't feel too slighted, but that's okay. So, but thank you for that. We're seeing a number of other questions here, so I'll just hit a couple of them really quickly here. As it relates to the answer Luke just gave, Dr. Ellis, there's a question here from Frank, says, Dr. Ellis, what kind of rollout schedule, excuse me, do you anticipate for overcoming the digital divide?
Well, I'm pleased to say that we put together a program using previously awarded federal funds. And as of, I think it was about a month ago, the digital divide had gone from several 100,000 students without connectivity or devices to zero. And so the governor has, it doesn't mean that there's still not challenges with remote learning. We know that there are, and we want to overcome those, but every student who didn't have their own device or didn't have the ability to purchase their own finances should now have a device through a program that we created to school districts last year, actually. So hopefully we're on the other side of that now.
Okay, great, thank you. Next question is for James. What will be done to make sure that some racial inequities can be eliminated? What process is to be used if racial discrimination is detected in the use of state and/or federal funds? Are there some existing pieces that you maybe want to touch on? Is there any specific language written in? Obviously, I know the commitment that the President of the United States has, our governor has, certainly I have, and certainly our Commissioner Gill has, to equity and making sure we do all we can to eliminate inequities. But specifically, is there something that would speak to anything above and beyond the laws that already exist that prohibit that to occur? Is there anything specific that's listed in the plan?
So I'm not sure if there's anything in the legislation that, require us to put an equity lens, but as you've noted, I think that's a value that we all share. And I can share that as director of the policy office for the governor, that is something that we think about with literally every single program. We're thinking about what are the equity implications? Is this going to the folks that are most in need? How are we distributing the dollars, and how are we prioritizing those who have traditionally been left out, and particularly with an eye to not only kind of economic injustice, but particularly racial equity. And so again, that's not something that I know, I believe is like prescribed in a particular way, but I know is a value that we all of us on this call, and certainly the President of the United States, the governor, share, and that we live out in the implementation of these programs.
Great, thank you. Next, Joanne has one about, could the additional revenue coming into New Jersey potentially offset Montclair to the extent of any budget deficit proposed and prevent any proposed cuts to township services? I mean, short answer is we have to do our budget process now, which is ongoing, again, a little bit before we have some of this guidance and these dollars that are in. So that will be in effect. But certainly as these dollars come in, we'll be looking to see where we can and how we can utilize them, moving forward. And as we, we'll have a mindful eye on they are limited in their availability, if you will, the use of them over a couple of years here. So we're mindful of that, but hopefully there are ways we can plug those pieces in and make sure we're supporting the services that our residents need. So just want a quick answer on that one. Here's another question, maybe Commissioner, I'll go to you. We have this conversation generally, but it's about can the funds be used for mental health crisis response teams and maybe put the dollars there instead of policing, is the question from Eileen. And my question to you is, a lot of the conversation is centered around, looking at that more broadly as a county. When you look at that ability for any one town to bring up a robust, department that might be able to do that kind of work versus the amount of calls that may come in, it potentially moves to the county level where that might be more doable and go from there. So where are the discussions around that? And do you see these dollars, again, although finite, as an ability to kind of move in that direction?
I think, Mayor, the answer to that question is those conversations are ongoing right now. I think one of the things that we've learned in the last year, and that we know will be key to the recovery, is that even if the pandemic is hopefully winding down, so to speak, that there are definitely long-term mental health implications, both, for many of us who have gone through that, no matter which way you were touched, through the crisis. So, I think we would like to, from a county perspective, continue to assess the municipal needs on that front, figure out efficient ways that we can continue to provide those mental health facilities. And I think you'll see, a larger and even more robust program, across the county, both through our current providers and potentially new ones, to help meet that challenge. In terms of, just wanted to touch really briefly on the question around equity, in who actually receives this money. I think I saw James Harris ask that question, and I believe that's Dr. Harris, who's out there, who's been an advocate on this issue for many years. And we're lucky to have him as one. But that's also something that really, going to need to be addressed. I think at the county and local level, we have to make sure that we have parameters in place to ensure that communities that have not normally been able to access government spending are able to do it. And there's a lot, I think we all do share that aspirational goal, But to be frank, it's an area where we continue to just come up short across the board, and we need to do more. So I'm definitely committed to to putting in the hard work to make sure that that happens, to make sure that the money again gets to those not only who need it but those who want to participate in this process, and that no one is cut out because of systemic disadvantages that have existed for a long time. Ones that I know we're trying to address, but we got to do more.
Thank you. We've got another question here from Francesca about the library. She states, would like to know if some of the American Rescue Plan resources and extra money from the state of New Jersey could be allocated towards restoring library funding. And again, so that our branches can be open, staff restored, et cetera, et cetera. My question would be, we saw under CARES, there's some discussion around whether libraries could go directly for some of those dollars. We know the dollars coming in, Luke, maybe this is to you, dollars coming into the state, county, certainly to local towns as well. Are there separate buckets for entities like the libraries or maybe other institutions that they can take advantage of, or do they need to go through some of the dollars that are allocated in those other places?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mayor, and certainly I'll leave it to Dr. Ellis for sort of how they're thinking about state funds. But there are various programs, and actually it's in your inbox now. There's a one-pager on sort of individual benefits available through the rescue plan that I think it's helpful if you want to follow up with the folks on this call so that they can see through sort of the various agencies different programs that they can access today. I do know that SBA has has launched a shuttered venues program. I'm not sure when and if libraries would qualify specifically for that funding, so that's something we can get back to you on. I also know that the Education Department has announced sort of numerous rounds of funding already for schools and other educational institutions. And also, I can't speak specifically to the library question, but that's something we can get back to you on. I'm confident that across the set of funding that's available, there would be a tool that's accessible. But maybe Dr. Ellis, if there's anything on the state side that you'd want to speak to, or the planning that's underway.
Just on the state side, I would just appreciate the question, and I will take it back because we haven't come up with exactly what the allocations will be yet, but it's a good thing to know that that's a need, and so we'll take that into consideration as we get that guidance.
Great. Excellent. Good to hear that. And again, that's the beauty of these town halls. It's interactive, and you guys bring that stuff back. That's wonderful. So thank you very much. Next is a question from Eric. Understanding that school aid is separate and apart from the state local aid, when will that aid flow to the school district? Is further guidance required regarding this issue? I'll just note, I think we did note, I've heard it's about $6 million would be going to our schools here in Montclair. I would imagine, Luke, you're going to say the same thing, right? All that stuff is being worked on now. My understanding is they are still waiting for that guidance as well. So I'm not sure if any of us could specifically say exactly when that aid is going to flow to our school district. Maybe, Luke, this part of the question, is there further guidance required? So I'm sure you guys exactly what that means, but maybe the question is around, will the guidance be significantly different than the parameters than on the municipal side, or anything you'd add there?
Yeah, it's kind of tough. It's such a large, the rescue plan is such a large bill. It's sometimes tough to parse it out, but certainly the funds that were directed towards school districts, those are already starting to flow, and some of those funds are sort of direct applications to the Department of Education, for instance. Many of them are through the state, so the state would apply and then access sort of block grant style funds to distribute them into the state school districts. But it sort of depends on the program. There's as has been said before, the extent of the need was so great, we really had to design a plan that could hit all of, make sure that we weren't leaving folks out. And so a number of different programs that are running at the same time to get dollars, where they're needed most. So that's underway.
Thank you for that. The next question from James. Some programs will require trained personnel. Are there plans for getting more people of African ancestry into construction trade unions? Who would like to answer that?
Happy to talk about that because I know that's something that the Commissioner of Labor is really very keen on, particularly around diversifying our apprenticeship programs. And I wish I had if I'd known we had this question, I would have gotten the statistics ahead of time, but he often talks about how much more diverse our apprenticeship programs are pre and post this administration coming into effect. And this is something that, again, he's just very passionate about. One, in diversifying, just to your point, historically in the construction trades, it has been too white and too segregated in terms of who has access to those very good paying union jobs. And so diversifying the entree into that is something that he's been passionate about, not only in terms of racial diversity, but also for women. Women are not traditionally in many of the trades. And so, again, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but we have increased several fold the number of women and people of color who, and I appreciate the distinction of people of African ancestry. Again, I can go and see if he has a specific breakdown, but we have increased significantly the numbers of those individuals who are in those pipeline apprenticeships to get those kinds of jobs.
Well, thank you for that. And I know that's been an ongoing conversation for some time, in a lot of different places. And I know that oftentimes, and Commissioner Gill, I know at the county level, you've done this, and a local level, when we develop, PLAs or project labor agreements or other pieces, of trying to incorporate some of those requirements for that diversification. But, again, pressing at all levels to try and see that happen is important. Another question here from James. Can any funds be used for school construction that was intended under the School Development Authority law? And maybe Dr. Smith Ellis, I'd go to you on that one again.
So potentially, yes. Again, I would say that the hopefully, knock on wood, forthcoming American Jobs Plan would help us a lot more than in terms of specifically around schools construction. But I also will plug, I know this is about federal funding, but the governor's budget, which is, state appropriations, included $200 million for the Schools Development Authority for a project, so that we won't have to, and this actually goes to debt avoidance, so that we won't have to bond for those projects. And then an additional $75 million for emergent needs. So definitely recognizing that the SDA needs to kind of get back on track in terms of funding the schools that are in those development authority areas. And we have dedicated some state funding to that and are looking forward to the potential to use future federal infrastructure money for that purpose as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well,
if I could just hop in on that answer too. And since we had two critical decision makers here on this, I'm gonna put the continued plug in, so to speak, for us to think about our facilities, because one of the things for me that became readily apparent is we knew we had this issue, particularly in New Jersey, around the conditions of our buildings and our schools, and that has been exacerbated, right, as we continue to try to get all of our students back into the buildings themselves. So when I think about what the opportunity that's before us, to me, it's not just to recover to the benchmark that we were at, but to recover above and beyond where we are. And as we think of it, from a policies perspective. So I'm excited about the possibilities of that, both from a county and local perspective, because in order to deal with potential crisis like this in the future, we're going to need these facilities to be greatly upgraded so we can make the type of smart public health decisions that we all want to make.
Well, Commissioner, thanks for that. And I couldn't agree more. And it's, I think probably because for many, right, the last time the experience in schools might have been when you went through the schools, but we're talking about situations and conditions, whether it be with the HVAC systems or the non-existence of them, that we would never even experience, whether it be office buildings or other buildings. I mean, it's just shocking when you talk about that infrastructure need and the condition of our buildings, our school buildings here in New Jersey. It's massive upgrades that are needed, and for the health reasons that you noted, and for so many others, right, for quality learning experience and so many other ways that's important. So hopefully, again, through the different plans that are either passed or being talked about or work ahead, hopefully, and of course at the state level as well, as was noted with Governor Murphy investing funds in some of these pieces as well. Hopefully we can get to his place where we're seeing major improvements in that space. So I am mindful of the time. We're approaching the hour, and we'd keep this to 1 hour, but I wanted to maybe quickly just go around the horn, and it's been a great conversation. I think we've answered a lot of questions that have come in, but I did want to, I think we'll take a quick one from, I know that we have Bob on, and I'm sure it's Councilman Bob Russo, so I better ask his question, I'm sure, or I'll be hearing about it at the next council meeting, everyone. So he does say a big thank you to everyone for participating, to the mayor, Dr. Smith-Ellis, and everybody on here, and he wants to note just a big thank you. So I'll read that off. Adriana, also a quick question about senior programming facilities, and just know that obviously we're going to try and make investments to kind of help every part of our community, every segment of our community, every resident of our community, and see how these dollars can be spent. So that's a yes in terms of trying to make sure that as we come back to a new normal and can do things safely, we build some of the either infrastructure or programming around that and in a sustainable way. So just wanted to quickly address those two quick ones. But again, back to thanking each and every one of you for being on. Just looking around the screen, Commissioner Gill, thank you very much for being on. Dr. Smith-Ellis, thank you as well. Mr. McGowan, thank you so much for being on. I want to thank each of you for your time today. And as we close it out with 2 minutes left, maybe I'll just go quickly around the horn and ask if there was something that maybe you hadn't heard in one of the questions, or something you wanted to share in a departing as we depart here, that people should be aware of with regard to certainly American Rescue Plan or anything else. And I'll just go in that order again because that's on my screen. So Commissioner Gill, do you have anything that you'd like to add really quickly?
Thanks, Mayor. No, thank you for having me. To my colleagues on the panel, thank you for joining with us today. I think these were great questions, and my hope is to get back to the best that I can to the constituents who participated today with which I believe are the right questions. We need to make sure again that this becomes tangible. So we don't, we're talking about big numbers and large investments, which I think we all know we need, but unless we can make sure that it gets to protecting our public library, the conditions of our public schools, the mental health service, the job training, that then it's really, that's where the rubber meets the road for me, personally. So I'm looking forward, to working with our state and federal partners to make what I believe will be really a generational investment, into our communities, a success and a big help, to everyone who needs it. So thank you so much for everything that each of you is doing.
Thank you, Commissioner. And you noted our state and federal partners. So let's go to our state partner, Dr. Smith-Ellis. Any closing statement?
Just quickly, I would say kudos to Commissioner Gill and the entire Essex team for the vaccination program. If you have not been vaccinated, please get vaccinated. That is my plea. We really need every single individual who is eligible. And that is everyone who is age 16 and up is now eligible across the state. We have several walk-in sites and appointments are available. So please get vaccinated.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. And Mr. McGowan, we're closing out with you.
Well, first of all, just thank you, Mayor, for having me on, and thank you to my fellow panelists. It's been a really interesting conversation, and I'll just close. It is exceedingly valuable to hear what's happening on the ground, and I think that's the theory behind many of the programs in the rescue plan, is getting resources where they're needed, and even just hearing from your city council colleague there. It is I know how live and lively the conversations can be about how to deploy those funds, but it's through those conversations that they really get to the people who need them most. So we hope that this this plan will do that. And my last plug, as we've talked about, the jobs plan, the families plan, they are these are live conversations, and so if anything is resonating with you, Mayor, or in your community, we'd be happy to help lift up those voices so that others can hear it. So thank you again for having me on.
Well, look, I like that. You're already setting up a future town hall for me then with that. So thanks so much. But as we close out this one, I want to thank each of you for being on today. I know how valuable your time is and how much you have going on. So I thank you for joining us. I know that every one of our residents who came on and asked questions, those watching, and thank you to Rick for streaming us on TV 34 and getting this out there to the broader community. And of course, those watching on Facebook Live, we want to thank you for being engaged, being part of this conversation, and we'll continue to bring conversations like this to you. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.